The JJK light novels are somewhat of a forgotten smorgasbord of world building and lore for the Jujutsu Kaisen world, and as a result I have covered all the stories from the first light novel, Summer of Ashes, Autumn of Dust. The stories here add a lot more depth to characters who sorely lacked it in the main series. We got stories about the main trio on a day out, following Gojo to a maid cafe, a story about Gojo and Nanami on a mission together, another story focusing on Mahito developing his hatred for humans. One story is with Ichiji and Yuji spending time together, and the final and fifth story shows us Yuji defeating a strange type of curse on his own. This video itself is a compilation of 5 videos that cover all of the stories from the first book. Now, as you can probably tell, this is going to be a long one. If this compilation does well, I'll start to cover the next group of stories from the second JJK light novel. But with that being said, here's everything you need to know about JJK's first light novel, Summer of Ashes, Autumn of Dust. Jujutsu Kaisen Light Novels. There are 2 of them, and despite them being canon, I haven't really heard many people analyse or discuss them at length before. The 2 novels themselves are a collection of short stories taking place during Season 1 or just before the Hidden Inventory flashback, as the trio are all friends here and are all alive. The light novels give us some nice, wholesome character interactions, a little bit of world building that JJK desperately lacks in its anime and manga, some character backgrounds and added context to character actions, as well as some nice artwork to accompany them. Whilst the novels themselves are written by Ballad Kitugani, he just kind of does the novel translation of these stories in a way. The stories themselves actually being created by JJK, so these stories are canon to both the anime and manga. The format of these light novels are an anthology of short stories. The first light novel, Summer of Ashes, Autumn of Dust, has both wholesome and horrifying stories from the Jujutsu Kaisen world. I'm going to go through the first story shown to us in this light novel and simplify the plot for you and tell you everything you need to know. If this becomes a series, I'm going to go through each of the stories from the light novels one by one, so let me know if you want more of this. But with that being said, let's jump into the first story of Jujutsu Kaisen, Summer of Ashes, Autumn of Dust. Story number 1, Jujutsu Kaisen. The plot itself focuses on the main trio of Yuji, Megumi and Nobara going on a bit of a shopping trip, and splitting into 2 groups of Megumi and Yuji, and Nobara herself going off on her own to shop. As Megumi doesn't trust Yuji on his own in a setting that is completely new to him. It starts off pretty wholesome with Yuji going to Akiba for sightseeing purposes, as both Yuji and Nobara are from the country, and the way Itadori describes Akiba tells us why he wants to go there. Page 10. Is there something you want to buy? Fushiguro asked. I doubt there's anything more than manga, video games and electronics. Huh? I'm going sightseeing, Itadori said. Shibuya and Shinjuku are alright, but whenever I see Akiba on TV, it has a real otherworldly vibe, sort of like a theme park. In this small story, we get some cute little interactions between Megumi and Yuji that help add a little bit to the 2's character dynamic and the friendly relationship between the 2 that we don't really see enough of in the actual manga. Page 11. This is crazy, Fushiguro. There are game centers everywhere. They're like convenience stores. Because this is Akiba. This is crazy, Fushiguro. Those maids are actually trying to get our attention. Because this is Akiba. This is crazy, Fushiguro. Is that a pervy video game? That's science for a pervy video game, right? Whoa, is that allowed? Like, right out in the open? Oh, I'm underage. Will I get in trouble? Shut up already. Akiba was a noisy place, but to Fushiguro, Itadori was 3 times noisier. And then, as the 2 explore Akiba, we are given one of the best pieces of dialogue in any piece of JJK media to date. Page number 12. Hey, Fushiguro, Itadori exclaimed. Let's eat a kebab. Kebab. Beautifully written, if I do say so myself. The 2 of them go to an arcade and end up playing a businessman-themed fighting game. Pretty based, not gonna lie. They play this game for an hour or so, finishing up with Yuji losing more times than Megumi, meaning the winner is Fushiguro. Rare Megumi win. I know, it's crazy. That never happens. But as the 2 are leaving the arcade, they spot a familiar sight. Gojo. He's in the arcade alone on his day off. And he's seemingly on a crane game, the one of which he's playing has sweets inside. But he immediately gives up after failing to get the sweets he wants from the crane game after a single attempt, so he heads to the exit. Yuji wants to follow Gojo to see what he's doing during his days off, as despite being the 2's teacher, as well as Fushiguro's adoptee father, they know next to nothing about him. As soon as they try to start following him, they lose him. Then they immediately see him eating a big-ass crepe. But as soon as Gojo finishes the dessert, the 2 students spot their teacher entering a vacuum tube specialty shop. I have no idea. Which leads to this goofy line of dialogue. Page 18. Is Gojo Sensei an audiophile? No, Fushiguro said. He seems more like the kind of guy to listen to music on YouTube. What the fuck does that line even mean? I mean, to be honest, this short story is filled with some absolute banger quotes from these 2. Page 18 again. There he is, Fushiguro. Gojo Sensei is hard to miss. He's huge. Yes, over 6 feet. He'd rule on a basketball court. Although I can't imagine him playing, Fushiguro said. Me neither. They follow Gojo around town, going all over the place, inside a vinyl store and buying a classical record from an old foreign film. They see him use a gachapon machine for a mushroom keychain, just to get bad luck and get a poisonous mushroom, much to Gojo's dismay. He goes into a bookstore and reads manga. Like, Gojo seemingly doesn't have a goal and he's just walking around town. He's letting his whims take the wheel, so to speak. The pair try to follow him into another building until Megumi stops, holding Yuji from rushing ahead. The two read the sign. Page 20. Angel Maid Cafe, Mischievous Cupid. Megumi theorizes that Gojo has entered this lovely establishment due to the ad for pancakes posted on the wall. Yuji and Megumi decide to end their sting operation here. They solve the case. Gojo tends to eat more sweets when he's rather busy. Case closed. Page 21. Well, we solved the mystery, so I guess we can stop following him. I'm too embarrassed to go in there. That's a smart decision, responded Itadori. For you, anyway. Welcome, masters. Maid then basically usher the two kids in, force angel wings and halos onto them. Fushiguro, the edgy Sasuke clone that he is, hates it. Yuji, however, absolutely loves it. The two of them get some orders of omu rice in front of them, and the server asks them to describe an anime scene that is, quote, heartfelt, beloved, or especially dramatic. And they need to describe this scene without telling the server the title of the anime they are actually describing. And if they do so successfully, they pass and will, quote, glob on more heart onto their meals, which I guess means she'll draw heart and ketchup or some crap, I don't know. The anime scenes described here are actually pretty funny. Let's see if you can guess them. I'm going to put footage on screen from said animes, so if you want to partake in this little game of trying to guess the anime, close your eyes, okay? Page 23. Whoa, that's hard, said Itadori. Okay, the main character is a boy who admires heroes. Ooh, I watched that, I'm a huge fan, exclaimed the server. And there's a character with a father complex. When he remembered how he wanted to become a hero, he uses his left hand, which he wouldn't before. I like that. The server likes the episode, but says it's a bit of a cliche scene choice and to try again. So Yuji gives it another shot. Alright then. A different anime. Itadori thought for a moment. The main character loses his parents and grows up in a ninja village, and there's a scene where everyone accepts him as worthy and tosses him into the air. Yes, that's so heartfelt. You know how his instructor, the only one who was on his side, gets tears in his eyes? That's the best, Itadori said. Yes, you're almost there. And he says something like, now there is a hero before my eyes, continued Itadori. From this, we know that Yuji is canonically a My Hero and Naruto fan. What an absolute G. Now that means all the shonen fandoms will stop having stupid arguments on Twitter, right? No, of course it doesn't. Yuji wins a free side for describing Naruto and My Hero as well, so that's a nice little dub for Yuji. But granted, the fries they get are described as being cooked from frozen and not worth the price. But, you know, a dub is a dub. The pair then get pictures with the maids together. Yuji getting flustered from the experience and Megumi hating every single moment. The two eat their overpriced meals and leave. As they're leaving, Yuji realizes they lost Gojo. More so, they forgot about him, really. Megumi is so miserable from this day of gaming and maid cafes that he doesn't really care anymore about following Gojo. Until Gojo himself appears behind the two, with Nobara in tow. Nobara herself looking pretty peeved. Gojo reveals that all the places he had been visiting have all been part of him looking for locales for first year students to get some more experience. He bought the vinyl because, according to rumours, a vinyl will agitate some of the nearby curses. Nobara then interrupts with her shock and annoyance, as well as confusion at the fact that Megumi went into a maid cafe. Gojo explains how he found these places with some lower-level curses to fight some first-year students, and now he has 3 first-year students in front of him to go to these said cursed areas. Yuji and Nobara are understandably peeved, but Megumi is, quote, stoked at the idea of fighting some curses. Gojo then gives us a little bit of extra info regarding the fight with the Roppongai curse from Nobara's introduction, which I find quite interesting. Megumi himself, during this fight, isn't a part of it, and as a result, Megumi was quite annoyed that he was left out and didn't get a chance to show off his skill. He denies this, but he didn't get a chance to show off and it's hitting him. The story itself ends with this Team 7 trio heading to the locations Gojo scouted out. However, something falls out of Yuji's pockets as the 3 kids walk away. Gojo picks it up, puzzled by what he's looking at and trying to figure out what it is. When he did, he burst out laughing. Page 28. He was 80% amused by how funny they looked and 20% amused by how heartwarming it was. Gojo stood there for a moment, smiling and holding the photograph of Itadori and Fushiguro in halos and angel wings in the company of a maid. Whilst this story itself is inconsequential, okay, in the grand scheme of things, unlike some of the other stories in the light novels, some of which focus on stuff like Ichiji, Nanami, and other cursed speech users, we'll talk about them if this video does well, the story does give us a bit of nice internal dialogue from Megami, as well as some wholesome interactions that are unfortunately missing from the main series. We also get a little bit of Gojo's thoughts at the end there. Since Gojo comes off as incredibly erratic and elusive for a lot of the series, he tends to be mischaracterized by the fandom a lot, in my opinion, so it's nice to read this wholesome narration of his thoughts when seeing a picture of his student and adoptee son next to a maid. It's nice. The story is pretty simple. They go to Akiba, they go to an arcade, they follow Gojo around, go into a maid cafe, get their picture taken, and then head on a mission. That's all it is, but it's still something I wish we saw more of in the main series. In a series where half of the named characters in this short story end up dead and mangled, it's nice to read these interactions that we never got to see. The relationship between Nanami and Gojo is unfortunately underutilized by Gege, in my opinion. They've known each other for a very long time, since even before the hidden inventory flashback. Nanami himself was Gojo's underclassman, but despite the two's long history together, we only ever see the two of them interact during Nanami's initial introduction during the Versus Mahito arc. Every other mention of the two and their relationship by Nanami or Gojo themselves is always kind of post-mortem. For example, we see Gojo discussing Nanami's death during Shibuya just before the Shinjuku showdown begins, stating that he always thought Nanami was the type who would survive one way or the other. We also see in the midst of the Shinjuku showdown, we get a flashback to Nanami himself discussing Gojo's power, saying that Gojo can't be kept up with. Now, why am I bringing this up? Since the reception of my last video regarding the JJK light novels exceeded all my expectations, to be honest, I decided to make this a little series and go through each story from the light novels one by one. Since I've already discussed and explained the first story, which is about Megami and Yuji following Gojo around on his day off, with that out of the way, let's move on to the second story from the first light novel, a story focusing around the dynamic I just described, giving us a bit more time with Nanami and Gojo as the two of them chase down someone who can supposedly sell dolls that raise the dead. This one is a little bit longer than the last, but I still hope you enjoy all the same. So, story number 2, The Resurrection Doll. The story begins with us being told that Nanami is going on a business trip and that he usually doesn't mind business trips. It allows him to go to places he would never really get a chance to see, and on top of that, it gives him a chance to unwind on his own, away from colleagues in the Jujutsu world. It gives him a chance to get some fresh air. Page 33. Without fresh air, he got depressed. Nanami keeping up with that edgy emo boy attitude from his youth, then it's revealed to us that the possibility of Nanami enjoying this work trip is exceedingly low, due to the fact that a more experienced sorcerer was accompanying him. And unfortunately for Nanami, but fortunately for me reading and you watching, the sorcerer joining Nanami on this expedition is the one and only honoured one, this goofy mother person. Gojo is joining Nanami on this trip, much to Nanami's annoyance and dismay. I mean, despite the two's storied past, as we see during Nanami's introduction, he has faith in Gojo's strength, but he has no respect for him as a person due to how flippantly he acts towards the rules and regulations of the Jujutsu world. So being on a work trip, trapped with him, is less than ideal for our sorcerer slash salary man. The two sorcerers are walking along, and much to Nanami's chagrin, Gojo keeps talking about random stuff, like how he likes buttered potatoes. Nanami all the while is confused and irritated by the presence of the honoured one. Page 34. You lie more often than you breathe. It cuts down on carbon dioxide emissions, no? The amount of CO2 from my size cancels it out, Nanami said. Two sorcerers coming all the way to Hokkaido together is kind of sad. It's alright, it's like we're on a variety show. What variety show could be this annoying? The expressions on their faces couldn't have been more different as the two sorcerers walked down bustling Odori Avenue. As Gojo and Nanami are exploring Sapporo in Hokkaido, the narrator remarks how the locale is pretty much grid-like and is almost impossible to get lost, looking similar to a Go board. However, Gojo then proceeds to pull a pamphlet out of his pocket. Upon closer inspection, it seems to be a map of Sapporo's central ward, and it's curiously covered in red circles in numerous locations all over the area. As Gojo reveals this map, he states that the grid-like nature of the locations makes it difficult to plan a route. Nanami goes curious as to what route he means. Why are these red circles all over the map? So he asks, page 34 again, what's with the map? Huh? Nanami, huh? That's really annoying. Get your act together, man, Gojo said. Think about it. What else could this be but Satoru Gojo's map of sweets? Feel free to do that on your own too. I try to conduct myself like a mentor, but you don't look up to me because you've never been someone worth looking up to, Nanami said. This small snippet of their conversation, I feel, perfectly encapsulates the relationship we see between the two veteran sorcerers. At least the relationship we see on the surface. Gojo's insistent narcissism met with Nanami's cold and straight-laced demeanour. I mean, this is reflected perfectly during Nanami's introduction in the main series. Nanami acting as the straight man to Gojo's flippant and facetious nature, despite his strength as the strongest of the modern era. The two are complete polar opposites, but due to their strength as sorcerers, their past together, as well as them both being active on missions, they are always drawn together, and I feel like the narrator perfectly describes this to us when describing how the two interact with each other, as well as Nanami's distaste for Gojo's personality, despite Gojo's higher level of power. Page 35. Nanami sighed so hard his lungs seemed ready to collapse. In personal conversations with Gojo, 90% of the things out of the sorcerer's mouth were nonsense. Gojo could only ever talk on his own wavelength. Responding in earnest was exhausting, but letting him ramble on was irritating. Gojo outranked him, was senior to him, and far surpassed him in strength and skill. Those who knew him well understood the significant inner distress this caused Nanami. After being annoyed by Gojo for so long, Nanami realizes something. That this mission is something he could more than likely complete on his own. Why does the strongest sorcerer, the great Satoru Gojo, even need to tag along? Gojo admits that Nanami should be more than capable of handling the situation if it's as advertised. However, Gojo has heard that a high-level curse user may be involved with this mission. Okay, little cut in. Just for clarification, I'm going to give you a quick definition here because it's important to make the distinction between a sorcerer and a curse user because a lot of people get it confused. So, a curse user is basically a sorcerer who isn't part of Jujutsu Tech or any of the sorcerer clans, right? So, when the term is used, think Geto's family like Laru and Miguel, as well as Awasaka and Ogami. If you're not a sorcerer, but you're a human who can use cursed energy, you're a curse user most of the time. Pretty self-explanatory, but it can still get a little bit confusing. Anyway, back to Nanami x Gojo, page 35 again. I agree there's nothing to worry about, it's a solo investigation, and you're fully capable of handling it. Then why did you come? To turn a simple job into an utterly simple job, Gojo said. One person may be enough for the situation, and a grade 1 at that, right? But I've heard a nasty curse user or something of the sort could be involved. You're saying we're up against a curse user equal to a grade 1 or special grade? It's just a possibility. You aren't the kind of person who would come all the way here for a mere possibility, Nanami said. Your perceptiveness is striking. Oh well, that's enough for now, isn't it? Maybe I'm just tired from my busy lifestyle and I need a vacation up north. Nanami then attempts to get some more details about what's actually happening regarding this mission, but Gojo stonewalls him and just points to the distance. Remember that artwork I put on screen? That artwork is for this story, and this is where it comes in. Gojo points to something in the distance and tells Nanami to look. Nanami goes along with Gojo's insistence, only to realize that he was pointing at someone selling buttered potatoes. As soon as Nanami realizes what he's looking at, Gojo's already ordered 2 of them. So the pair sit on a nearby bench and eat their buttered potatoes. They discuss stuff about potatoes, and I'm being serious, there's about a page or 2 of Gojo and Nanami just talking about potatoes, so despite it sounding humorous, we're just going to kind of go past it since there isn't too much to discuss about it, except for the fact that the two can have a normal conversation without it just being Gojo yelling and Nanami being annoyed at that. Then the two start walking and discuss more about this investigation. Whilst the two are also eating ice cream, Gojo of course going for something sweet, while Nanami chose a cheese and milk twist ice cream, and that sounds absolutely diabolical to me. That sounds grim. Cheese flavoured ice cream does not sound good. Anyway, Gojo all the while is asking questions about the investigation from Nanami, which doesn't make much sense. Page 39. Normally Gojo would have known about the mission and wouldn't have to ask Nanami. The fact that he did meant he hadn't gotten any info beforehand. In other words, Gojo had known this mission wasn't important enough for his participation, but he had come along anyway. Nanami knew Gojo was busy and wouldn't come to the North Country just to kill time. He wondered what Gojo's real purpose was. Nanami then decides his best option is to just give Gojo a quick explanation to catch him up with the situation, explaining that it's a website. Page 39 again. It's on an independent server to avoid search engines, but Ichiji was able to track it down. The man's got skills. Gojo's matter-of-fact tone suggests he expected nothing less. I do really like this quote from Gojo. It's a nice little call forward, in a sense, to Gojo's statements about Ichiji that we see during Shinjuku, about him being the person he trusts most. I feel like it shows Gege has all these character relationships in his head, planned out from the start, but he never shows them in the manga. And with this supplementary stuff we get from the light novels, we finally get little glimpses of that, like the trust between Gojo and Ichiji. The two continue to discuss the website and the curse user, how the website is basically, you fill in a form, you send in a request, the website then gives you an address to mail your payment to. The address shown leads to a small share house in Hokkaido, nowhere of real note. However, on the website it will randomly display one of 20 PO boxes. By the sounds of it so far, there doesn't really seem to be anything related to a cursed user. It seems more like a scam than anything curse related. So Gojo asks what this website actually sells that would result in Nanami being sent in to investigate. If it was cursed tools for fly heads, or someone taking orders to curse people, it wouldn't warrant sending Nanami in, a grade 1. So what's so dangerous that the higher-ups sent Nanami to investigate while also not informing Gojo on what he's looking for? Page 41. Resurrections of the dead. Say what? Gojo didn't often doubt his ears, but what Nanami just said was ridiculous. Despite the two sorcerers agreeing that the dolls are 99% fake, in all actuality. However, that 1% possibility has the veterans proceeding to investigate. Upon finding out, however, that these dolls may have the chance to bring back the dead, Gojo realizes the reason the higher-ups kept the details of the mission a secret to him. They don't want any possibility of Sukuna's vessel to be revived. And given the fact that Gojo sees Yuji as this potentially strong ally and student for him to help grow, Gojo doesn't want Yuji to be executed. However, chronologically, this story takes place just before Nanami's introduction, meaning at this point in JJK, the higher-ups think that Yuji is dead. So from the perspective of the higher-ups, if these dolls and their abilities were real, Gojo would be able to revive Sukuna's vessel against the higher-ups' wishes. Despite Gojo himself saying that he is 100% sure that the doll's abilities aren't real, he is still infuriated that the higher-ups would keep him in the dark and that they believed Gojo would even stoop low enough to believing in such a rumour if it meant he could revive Yuji. But as I say, at this point in the timeline, Yuji is thought to be dead by the higher-ups. This is more clearly explained later, but I'll get to that point. Page 42. Those scumbags intent on burying Sukuna's vessel? They want to keep me in the dark, huh? Gojo said. So you understand. They misjudge me. Do they really think I'd rely on something like this? Gojo says that he doesn't really think these dolls are the real deal. I mean, as he says, if these dolls were really capable of bringing back the dead, the world as we know it would come to an end. Which is pretty much true. I mean, look at the main story of Jujutsu Kaisen, look at Kenjaku reviving all these people back from the dead. It has nearly brought the entire world to absolute catastrophe, with Kenjaku intimidating the leaders of the world on top of the merger still needing to be released, as well as Sukuna destroying entire cities. So Gojo is far from wrong when saying this. It's just ironic that it is Gojo saying it, because Gojo is, you know, the person who changed the world irreparably through him simply being born, raising the power ceiling as well as striking fear into curse users everywhere. He knows what can throw the power balance of the world into absolute disequilibrium, and from that alone he knows these dolls probably aren't real due to the fact that, you know, the world would know if they were real. Page 43. Even though the claim of resurrecting the dead is itself highly dubious, Gojo said, that doesn't mean I can just let it go. Work is work. Gojo looked up as he nibbled on his cone. Ice cream had dripped onto his thumb, and he licked it off. The expression on his face as he peered at Nanami through his sunglasses was one of exhaustion. As the two continue walking, Gojo asks Nanami, which was better, being a salaryman or a sorcerer? Which one was crappier? Gojo, here, feeling as if he's asking for a recommendation for a job change. Nanami remarks how it just depends on whether or not you're cut out for it. But beyond that, the difference between the two jobs to Nanami was negligible. But, however, Nanami jokes and says that being a salaryman may have been better because it doesn't involve Gojo. Gojo and Nanami then give the person making these dolls a pretty apt title when discussing him. The title of the Doll Maker. Pretty on the nose name, but it sticks. The location of the Doll Maker is seemingly underground, under the main city of Sapporo. Under the main city lies an underground city filled with libraries, kiosks, convenience stores, hair salons, and if the two are lucky, a doll maker. But as the two explore this city, they can feel how stagnant the air is around here. The sheer volume of people in this labyrinth, the mixing of emotions, it makes tracking anything with cursed energy super easy for Gojo. Gojo and Nanami then go to a place away from this underground city's centre, a place with side passages and alleys along each street, until the duo come across a peculiar scene. Page 45. The two sorcerers were looking at a mother holding a baby. A boy, about 5 or 6, stood at her side. To make a short story a little bit shorter for the sake of my sanity, the young boy by the woman's side starts screaming at his mother, saying that he isn't a big brother, the baby in her arms isn't his brother. The mother of these children, with an almost fanatical love for her little one within her arms, takes the love she has for this baby and turns it into anger aimed towards her eldest son, raising her hand to strike the child, until she is stopped by the interfering Nanami. These two complete strangers move closer towards this woman to glean more about the situation, as the woman cries and screams to be let go, and how this is none of their business. Page 47. Gojo was leaning in to peer at the baby in the mother's arms. I wonder what we find. And there it is. He looked up at Nanami. Selling such a thing and calling it resurrection is the height of fraudulence. As Gojo and Nanami inspect closer, it's clear that this is a doll, not a newborn, in the woman's arms, as the mother screams how she gave birth to both of her children, frantically aiming to shoo these men away from her children. She gave birth to them. They are her kids. She gave birth to her baby. Page 47 again. No, you bought it, right? Nanami said. The woman freezes in her acknowledgement of Nanami's words. It is a cursed corpse. The woman is confused by the term as the two men are discussing it, but it's clear that the woman herself, despite being in possession of this thing, has no knowledge of sorcery or curses or anything of the like. Nanami explains to this woman that it's a doll, a surprisingly lifelike and well-made doll, but a doll all the same. And that of all people, she must be aware of this fact since she was the one who bought it. Page 48. The baby was indeed well crafted. It wiggled its arms and legs as its pink cheeks trembled. It was a textbook example of all the traits that would awaken motherly instincts, but that's merely how it appeared to most people. To a sorcerer's eyes, it was hideous. Nanami attempts to subtly question this clearly broken woman into what the cost was to attempt to revive her child, until Gojo interjects. Page 48. I bet you had to fork over the corpse of the brat you wanted to revive. Gojo's lack of tact and sympathy disappoint Nanami, but given the expression on this grieving woman's face, Gojo's accusation was right on the mark. The reason this doll was so lifelike was due to the fact that pieces of the child's original corpse would have been used to recreate its visage. Whilst Gojo seems overly cold and harsh here, it is noted by the narrator that he acted in such a seemingly cruel way to alleviate this burden from Nanami, since he was clearly having difficulty questioning this grieving mother, something Gojo has zero issues with. They push forward in their questioning and the mother screams how they're lying, saying that if she paid money, her baby would be brought back. To which Nanami explains to the woman that it's her own prerogative. If she wants to stay in the past, she can. Nanami hasn't lost a child, so he has no right to tell her how she lives her life. However, the child clinging to her legs was trying to warn her. That's not his brother. She knows this. She knows Nanami is speaking the truth and hands over the cursed corpse made from the remnants of her child. Page 50. She had regained what she lost, only to lose it again. The two put the cursed doll in a bag and continue to explore the city in pursuit of its creator, which isn't too difficult given Gojo's prowess regarding tracking due to the abilities of the Six Eyes. Tracking the residual cursed energy left on the doll, they come to an area hidden in this underground city, hidden via a barrier which is described to be similar to a curtain. They then find the dollmaker's hideout and kick down the door. The dollmaker himself shoots up, alerted at the two veterans approaching. He questions them, asking who they are. Page 51. We're sorcerers. Proper ones. Unlike you. Gojo's tone bore an unusual degree of contempt. Upon closer inspection, this cursed user seems like nothing more than a hack, adorned in clothes similar to a Shinto priest or onmyoji, aka an old-school Japanese wizard. The robes he's wearing themselves covered in seals with small pieces of cursed energy exuding from them. His room filled with tacky souvenirs to give the air of a sorcerer to those who come to him in desperation. Page 52. Sorcerers? I see you're sorcerers too. What do you mean too? Surely you don't count yourself among sorcerers, Gojo exclaimed. Nanami probably felt the same way. The crease on his forehead was deep and it expressed a visceral hatred for the dollmaker's existence and his crimes. Their anger reaching a boiling point, they trap the dollmaker, blocking the exit with their bodies as they push forward towards him, allowing him no escape, until something takes Nanami by surprise. The dollmaker falls to his knees and clings onto Nanami's legs in fear. He cries for help. He's glad they're here. Gojo and Nanami realise the cursed energy coming from this man is far too weak. His cursed energy was so weak, it would be a stretch to call him a cursed user. So weak, in fact, he could be defeated easily by a single first-year student, let alone Nanami and Gojo in tandem. Page 53. We thought he was cursing people for sport, but turns out he's a victim himself. The man suddenly shifts and rips the seals covering his claws. Arm-like appendages shoot out from his body. Nanami dodges until said appendages release insect-like creatures from their tips. The arms themselves swinging around like whips. The dollmaker's body is changing. He's becoming a doll of flesh. The only parts of his body that retain a somewhat human appearance are his left arm and his head, whilst the rest of his figure is a writhing, contorted mass. All the while, a doll head burrows and bites into his heart. The dollmaker screams and cries for help, offering the two men money to save him, his body writhing in agony as he uncontrollably attacks Nanami. Nanami also realises that the arms attempting to strike him were a non-issue. However, the insect-like creatures that have burrowed into the dollmaker's skin are swelling inside his stomach. Nanami looks even closer. He in turn realises that these aren't insects, they are cursed corpses. His body is being turned into a cursed corpse factory. They've been devouring this man's body slowly. Gojo chimes in, page 54. I've been wondering what happens to the flesh left over after you use the skin from the cursed corpses to make cursed dolls for the parents. Now I see you were using it to replace your own consumed flesh, said Gojo. Despite the man's agony, the two proceed to go in depth and discuss this man's motives and possible history, saying that he may be from an old line of sorcerers who pulled out a cursed tool out of storage, or he just simply found an unmanageable cursed object. But even still, the dollmaker's intentions were never good. He still created the website and made these fake resurrections for monetary gain. So arguing that he was under extenuating circumstances won't cut it for Nanami and Gojo. Page 55. A doll that feasted on human flesh to produce more dolls, and a dollmaker who gathered dead bodies to replace his own consumed flesh. He couldn't keep up and was eventually possessed by this doll. None of it should have existed in this world. Nanami and Gojo wore the same look on their faces. It expressed a grim resignation. Nanami then shows his hand to the dollmaker, explaining the 7-3 ratio technique, strengthening the technique itself. He charges at the dollmaker, pitying the state he is in now, but also stating that he's in this position due to him wanting monetary gain above all. It's his own fault. The dollmaker pleads and says that he saved people's hearts by reviving their dead. Nanami, not faltering, said that he was spreading curses to other people. The dollmaker realises he has no other options left. Though transformed into this contorted mess of doll-like limbs and wooden bones, he throws himself at Nanami, screaming that he will kill him. Nanami merely states that the dollmaker should act like an adult and take responsibility for your actions. Nanami swings so swiftly and with such precision that the man doesn't even release his final breath. The dollmaker's body slowly falls apart into two pieces, in the perfect ratio of a 7-3. All the small insect creatures within the dollmaker shake and rattle until they grow still. Gojo congratulates his grade 1 cohort on a good job. Nanami retorts that it would have been easier if Gojo just did it himself. Gojo then replies that Nanami's technique is much more suited to give the man a human death. The two then leave the area, request a cleanup for what's left of the dollmaker. The final scene in this story cuts to us seeing the two men in a bar, discussing the recent events as well as Gojo's actual reason for joining Nanami on this excursion. Said discussion also tells us when in the JJK timeline of events this story actually takes place. Nanami starts the night by drinking a Gimle cocktail, whilst Gojo drinks a Florida, which is non-alcoholic and a nice callback to Gojo being stated to be not much of a drinker in the fanbook. Gojo discusses how Nanami is good at shutting things out, just like his actions with the dollmaker, and in the future, his students will eventually face off against something similar. Gojo knows this, but his students, unlike Nanami, don't have the means to shut these kinds of things out. They're too sensitive, and if Megumi, Nobara, or Yuji face something like that, it could break their hearts. Nanami, initially confused by this conversation, changes his tone and listens carefully as he realises Gojo isn't wearing his signature goofy smile or his laid-back demeanour. The two glasses now empty, Gojo orders 2 Cinderellas, also non-alcoholic and really sweet, much to Nanami's dismay and disbelief. Page 59. There's a kid I want you to look after at some point. Is it Fushiguro? Yuji Tadori. You know him. I heard he died. Nanami said. He harbours the king of curses, which is a far cry from some charlatan using dolls to bring back the dead. This line in particular tells us that this story is after Yuji's initial death, but before the Goodwill event, and of course, before Nanami's introduction, given the fact that Nanami thought Yuji was dead and hasn't met him yet. So this story takes place relatively early on in the series. The bartender places the pair of cocktail glasses in front of the sorcerers, and Nanami interjects. Page 59 again. I know you hate the Jujutsu world at the moment, but I side with regulations now. I don't know what you have in mind regarding Sukuna's vessel, but I don't mean Sukuna's vessel, Gojo said. I'm talking about Yuji Itadori. His situation is not so simple that we can ignore the obvious when talking about him. Gojo then describes his newbie sorcerer that has come under his tutelage. He's determined, brave, and decisive in a fight, but he's a bit too uptight, and Gojo believes that will eventually break his heart. Page 60. I need someone who understands the suffering people go through. Someone like you. Did you come all this way to sweet talk me? Well, you know how much I have a taste for sweets. Laughing, Gojo tilted his glass towards Nanami. The story ends with the two of them drinking into the night. Overall, I very much enjoyed this story. It demonstrates Gojo's evolved philosophy after Geto defected, and he acknowledges Nanami, as well as his experience and the realities he has had to endure as a Jujutsu sorcerer. It shows how much Gojo trusts and respects Nanami, trusting him just like Ichiji with the info that Yuji is alive, and also trusting Nanami to teach Yuji as well. We get to see more of the dynamic between these long-term colleagues, as well as see and hear the level of trust between these two men. And Gojo suggesting that Yuji's good-hearted nature will cause him pain in the future is quite an apt thing for Gojo to say, given that as soon as Nanami meets Yuji, Yuji will be forced to see the harsh realities of what it means to be a sorcerer. Junpei, Nobara, and Nanami himself. The story itself is slow to start and the climax was a bit short, but in conclusion, I like this story. And just like the previous one, it's not overly complex. Gojo and Nanami go on a business trip. They eat some potatoes, they go to an underground city, stop a mother from hurting her child, find a person who's taking advantage of grieving mothers who've lost their children and is stealing their flesh, finish off said person who steals baby flesh, then go to the bar and finish the night off by talking about Yuji. Also, if you couldn't tell, the artwork I used from earlier is from Jujutsu Kaisen Phantom Parade, the Japan-only mobile game. It has some artwork from the light novel stories, which is pretty cool. Just wish it was a global mobile game instead of just being JP only, but yeah. Despite being arguably both one of the most popular and powerful disaster curses, Mahito still has a lot of mystery surrounding him. And on top of that, we don't really see enough of him in the main series in my opinion. He's the only curse to land a Black Flash, he has a hacks ability with his Idol Transfiguration curse technique, and as a result has a busted domain expansion. And through those abilities, he removed 3 characters from the story for over 130 chapters, one of which he removed permanently. And along with all of that, he has the final spoken dialogue in the entire series of JJK. He got the last words. Because of this, I feel like we should have seen a bit more of him before the Shibuya incident. Well, the light novels help fix this problem of mine. I've previously covered 2 other stories from the light novels, and this will be the 3rd. In this story, we follow Mahito and his actions before his introduction, before meeting Junpei in the movie theatre, seeing how he interacts and views humans, alongside how he interacts with the disaster curses. Now, with that small introduction out the way, let's discuss story number 3, Allegory in Darkness. The story itself starts with the disaster curses finding a new base of operations in an office building in the city, at the behest of Pseudo Geto, as he was still called at this point. All the while, Jogo himself is setting the office workers on fire and laughing about it, which is a very Jogo thing to do. As the disaster curses are shown to us, Hanami sends their thoughts into the other cursors' heads. This means that the other cursors don't understand what Hanami is actually saying, it's just that Hanami sends their thoughts into the heads of the other disaster cursors, which is something Jogo really doesn't like the feeling of, so he gets mad at Hanami. Also, Dagon isn't here either. Maybe he's just chilling in his own domain with Kenjaku, who knows? As Hanami, Jogo and Mahito are clearing out this building, Jogo notices that Mahito is quite absent-mindedly looking around the interior of this building, this new base of operations. So, Jogo questions him. Page 64. What's wrong, Mahito? Are you unsatisfied? What don't you like? It's a good location to prepare an attack on the city and to flee if necessary. Yeah, I guess so, but yes, but well, spit it out. The interior decor is really tasteless, Mahito said. Huh? A small eruption came from Jogo's head with a poof. As the two argue, Jogo can't understand what has been making Mahito act so strange as of late. Then we get a big introduction to something that is a core theme to understanding Mahito's character, as well as a parallel to some other characters. And on top of that is a theme or hobby that will have a chain reaction and result in the deaths and development of multiple characters, including himself. Page 64 again. It's the movies. Movies. You like movies? They're nothing but superficialities, Jogo said. Actually, they're a reliable resource to study the soul, Mahito said. A human looking at him then might think he resembled an elementary school student puffed up with pride as he recited knowledge he acquired for a book report. To be honest, it isn't a very interesting topic for me either, but I don't exactly dislike human visual aesthetics. Still, this room is too colourful, it hurts my eyes. Mahito, displeased with the feng shui of the Disaster Curse's new super secret base, decides to just leave and find a place where he can relax on his own, just letting the other curses handle getting set up as he casually waves goodbye to just do his own thing, causing Jogo to act like the hothead he is and get angry. However, at the same time, Jogo theorizes that Mahito's frivolous nature may be due to him being created from human fear. He's the most human out of the Disaster Curses after all, in both appearance and mentality, as we see with his rate of growth. So it makes sense for him to have more human sensibilities when compared to the other Disaster Curses. Well, at least on the surface, because as we see in Shibuya, Mahito is the most monstrous out of the four. As Mahito leaves in search of his new own hideout, Jogo then pulls out his iconic human-shaped pipe, lights up, and then curses Mahito. Page 65. Drat that Mahito. Jogo swiveled his eye around the room. Now this looks tasteless to me too. That little interaction with the other Disaster Curses is unfortunately all we'll see of them throughout this story. However, what this story does do is it explains why Mahito hangs out in the sewers instead of with the other Disaster Curses at their hideout during the Versus Mahito arc. We cut back to Mahito, exploring the city. When coming upon traffic lights, he flippantly chooses to go left and right, simply exploring with a childlike, frivolous lack of intent, following nearby cats as they patrolled the area, following the clouds if their shapes intrigued him. As he moves around the city, he grows to understand more about his feelings towards humans, how humorous they are to him. This town is for humans, it belongs to them, yet none of the humans walking these streets walked as freely around them as Mahito did. Page 66. Everyone looked tense, bound by inhibitions and vanity, living short-sighted lives in a vast and fathomless city, without ever knowing how infinitely large the sky was. They took a city of stone, they had divided it up, further divided it as their souls saw fit, and lived subserviently within those narrow confines. As Mahito roams around, we grow to understand his mentality and how it mirrors other characters in the series. Page 66 again. Mahito came to understand their worldview through the words they used. For example, they called this morality, they called that common sense, and they called that emotion. Their souls received external stimuli, and they merely metabolized them. Like machines, this process controlled their bodies, so they feared the judgment of others, sought the world's favour, and relinquished their freedom. He remarks how the things humans created bind them to these lives, and that is why curses have to change human beings. If all they do is clumsily live like this, they should just give this world to the curses. Page 66 yet again. Think as your soul desires, walk where the wind blows. A philosophy like this feels like something coming from Sukuna or an early Gojo. Do what you want when you want. It feels very reminiscent of those characters and their views on the world, as well as how the strongest should act. However, in Mahito's case, it is people on a whole, less so just the strong. Mahito then comes to a very familiar looking spot. The place he found to call his new hideout could be found under a large bridge that crosses over a river. Below said bridge is a wide tunnel. The tunnel was seemingly filled with plumbing around the walls and ceiling. This area probably feels as you imagine it does, just from looking at it. The air is damp and humid, smelling like moss, and on top of that the temperature is cold due to the area being majorly concrete. The lighting in the area was also perfect for Mahito, appearing gloomy and, quote, perfect for breeding fear. All of these unappealing characteristics to us humans were all to Mahito's liking. It was refreshing to him. Mahito then gleefully bounces around his new humble abode. However, he senses the presence of something in the sewers alongside him. Upon first seeing it, he merely assumes it was a pile of trash, the effects of humans littering nearby, but as he glances, he notices the shape of this thing's soul. Page 67. Oh, so it's alive. It was a man wrapped in an old cloth. His long hair and beard had obscured his human shape. His exact age wasn't readily apparent. He might have been 60 or over 80. elderly at any rate. Mildly annoyed at this old man's appearance in his newly found home, Mahito lets out a brief sigh. Despite this, however, Mahito knows how easy it is to solve such an issue, so he extends his hand towards this decrepit figure. Page 67 again. Sorry if you find me unpleasant. Huh? I don't know what you've come for, but finding an old-timer like me here must have spoiled your mood. But I don't have anywhere to go either. Don't forget that Mahito here is a curse. No human should be able to see him, or at least none that aren't sorcerers, but this intriguing person can. He must have some innate cursed energy, just being born with cursed energy, and as a result can see spirits, and just happen to never become a cursed user or sorcerer. So, out of curiosity, Mahito looks closer to the man's face. His eyes, they weren't there. He could see him, but he didn't have eyes. His eyes were covered in burn scars, covering both of the man's eye sockets. Page 68. You can see me? The old man nodded in response to Mahito's question. I can sense you, even though you can't see your surroundings. Of course, like the scenery, it's unclear to me what kind of features you have, what colour your skin is, or whether you're a man or a woman, said the old man. Nonetheless, I know you're there. Mahito questions this newly found pest inside his home, asking if he's a sorcerer. The man is seemingly confused by the question and simply replies that he doesn't think so. He takes another glance at the man's soul because something seems off. So you see, most human souls fluctuate. They quiver, they can be a variety of shapes and sizes, but they always fluctuate. This man, however, is an outlier. You see, his soul is peaceful. It fluctuates very little. It was like a, quote, grassy field with no wind, a sea with no waves, a blue sky with no clouds. No, Mahito realized the more appropriate comparison was to a rock. He had a soul like a boulder by the side of the road, unadorned, unpolished, unmoving, unwavering. It just passed the time in tranquility, quietly gathering moss. That was the shape of the old man's soul. This is fascinating to Mahito. He had never in his time living so far seen a soul such as this. Human souls waver. No matter how mild, cool, calm, collected they appear to be on the surface, they waver. But this man's soul did not. It was peaceful. A soul that had accepted its own death through the passage of time, and as a result, wouldn't waste its life in pointless distress. Page 69 again. It was almost like a truly natural existence. Mahito had never encountered a human being like that before. Mahito then spends his time growing accustomed to his new hideout, leaving the homeless man to do his own business. In the meantime, Mahito sets up a hammock and spends his time reading and gaining more knowledge on the human world. And funnily enough, the idea to put up a hammock is an idea Mahito got from watching a movie. Mahito proceeds to then question the old man sometime later, wondering how he even survives, as Mahito notices that the man sits in the corner, expressionless for hours. But then sometimes when Mahito would leave and come back, he'd be gone. And then sometimes he'd appear back there at his post, so to speak. Mahito would even notice the man getting a bit skinnier, but he'd quickly disappear for a while and reappear after seemingly eating, looking much fuller. This manner of existence is almost strictly instinctual. Mahito loudly speculates in his hideout to himself that maybe this lifestyle is the reason for the old man being able to see him. But after noticing that the old man's soul was unwavered by this hypothesis after hearing it, Mahito asks the man a question directly. Page 70. How long have you been here? Well, I suppose I've passed a few winters here, but I'm not certain. The old man answered with a quiet mutter. Mahito understands that if two beings are coexisting in the same area, it's natural for them to have a conversation from time to time. So they continue. Page 71. Don't you get bored? Mahito spoke casually, and the old man responded in kind. I forgot how to be bored. Mahito continued to question the man. What do you do all the time? Nothing. I just listen to sounds. Sounds? The sounds of flowing water. The man responded. Is that fun? No, but I've forgotten to have fun, so it doesn't bother me. Mahito thought that made sense and nodded. Mahito still thinks to himself about how remarkable this man's soul is. He must truly want nothing. Wants and greediness cause the souls to change over time. No soul can be truly satisfied forever, or they fluctuate at the fear of losing their satisfaction after they claim it. Souls are always changing from fear of something, whilst this man's soul fascinatingly remains still, polished, stylish even. So he questions the man further, asking for his name, just for the old man to reply that he doesn't have one. He doesn't need one, really. Mahito glibly wonders what name will be put on the man's grave if he doesn't have a name. The man calmly replies that he'll probably be put in a mass grave or simply rot away somewhere. Mahito states that he was joking when he said that and is shocked that the man couldn't tell that he was kidding. From this, Mahito sees an innocence, a youth within this old man, which only causes him further intrigue in learning more about him. Mahito asks why the old man came here. Why is he living like a rat in the sewers? So the old man obliges and answers. He was once your standard average working man. He had a wife and a family. He worked. He inherited a house. He had status, Mahito remarks. The man agrees. However, he reveals that he lost it all. How so? He was swindled, tricked, deceived. Turns out his wife and an old friend of the man's had been having an affair together, and they burnt his eyes, but they made it look like an accident and claimed that they were looking after him. But before the old man realized it, the two traitors had taken all of his assets. Despite all this, however, the man claims that the despair he felt wasn't from losing everything that he owned. It was that the people that he loved each other, but none of them loved him. Mahito struggles to interpret this. The curse knows love as a concept in the realm of humans, from the outside looking in, so to speak, but he doesn't understand why that's what affected the old man the most. Page 73. Didn't you curse the people who tricked you? He asked. Not particularly. The old man replied. Not particularly, huh? People in such circumstances get angry and bear a grudge, then their souls degenerate. Yes, but I didn't have the energy to seek revenge or to make them suffer. Oh, I see. Mahito nodded in understanding. From Mahito's exploration of humans and their creations, such as movies, books, etc., despite not understanding it fully, he could somewhat grasp why he believed the man wouldn't have the energy to seek revenge, saying that it was probably from an intense despair that drained him whilst he was at rock bottom. But that's not what the old man meant, saying that what he was feeling wasn't a bottomless despair. Page 74. I didn't experience anger or dismal sadness. I think I was just tired. Work, acclaim, status, responsibility, social responsibilities, finances, fame, those things were exhausting. So exhausting that they emptied me. And that's why you didn't get angry at the deception? It was a relief. They say hopelessness can make one feel lighter. The old man's voice had a cold clarity, like impure water that had passed through a filter. It sounded peaceful. After losing every worldly possession the man had, along with his eyes, he was truly free. He was no longer restrained by the society around him, nor by the things he saw. Page 74 again. When you can't see, sound stretches to infinity, and there's only the wind. There aren't any walls partitioning the city. There's just a limitless darkness like a starless sky. It was the first time I had experienced the world as an open space, and I realized I was free. Mahito's growing understanding of this figure even has him quoting J.R.R. Tolkien of all people. Page 75. Not all those who wander are lost, huh? Mahito said. Isn't that a bit depressing for a quote from Tolkien? Mahito smiled at how the old man immediately identified the quote. One Mahito had read in a random book he'd picked up. Mahito then says to the old man that if every human in the world was like him, he wouldn't have been born. Here is a curse and a human simply coexisting with each other, passing time, calmly, together. If you haven't noticed this yet, the story has a lot of parallels between some stories related to the Buddha, right? And just to make all those parallels a bit clearer, the next thing we read that Mahito does is he finds a worn-out copy of the Heart Sutra. Mahito believes that the old man, though unintentionally, has reached a state of enlightenment. That's why he can sense Mahito. Page 76. He must have already had the potential. After all, it's easy for talent to bloom in introverts. If Mahito pondered the old man further, he might be able to guess sorcerers' training methods and techniques for manifesting cursed energy. Then he might be able to turn talented human beings into sorcerers and cursed users. He might be able to spur a cursed user he had groomed into becoming a sorcerer. That would be an interesting experiment. It was easier to upset human souls by making them fight each other than by having them exercise curses, and he doubted Sukuna's vessel was any exception. However, maybe I'll save that for later. This line is in reference to Junpei, clearly, but also by proxy, referencing the Culling Games players who are turned into curse users and sorcerers through Kenjaku using Mahito's idol transfiguration. Mahito then takes a couple more books to read peacefully in his little hideout. He starts quite happily strolling home, humming all the while, until he hears two men talking in a nearby alley. A built, bald man and a skinnier man with long hair. The bald guy basically keeps saying that he could kill anyone, quote, killing ain't nothing. Nothing much happens here. Mahito just watches and listens to them talk about killing someone. Anyone, really. They just want to do it for street cred, so to speak. But Mahito just observes them voyeuristically and due to his ability to see the shape of the soul as well, he can just see that they're full of it, right? They're not going to kill anyone, so he just continues to walk home. Then we cut to Mahito reading Kafka, of all things, and questioning why the main character became a bug.
Yeah. Totally Kafkaesque.
Page 78. Most people think it's allegorical, said the old man. Allegorical? An allegory for how society hated him and treated him like an insect. Like an old man who gets deceived and has his eyes burnt out. Was that a joke? Mahito asked. No, not really. Mahito has been trying to understand humans more and more through consuming their creations like movies and books, as I say. And the old man is intelligent, and he has been helping Mahito to interpret some of the subtleties of the media he is consuming, acting like a nearby Wikipedia that helps whenever Mahito is struggling to understand what the human side of what he's looking at is. I mean, when you take a step back and look at what's happening, Mahito, this guy, is reading Kafka whilst discussing it with a homeless man, and at the same time, Mahito is recognizing that the old man is quoting Virginia Woolf of all things in the conversation. Like, this is just wild in a nutshell, right? Page 78. Gregor is an insect, so his family tries to keep him hidden, but he crawls out and dies in the end. Why do you think that is, old man? Because you cannot find peace by avoiding life. That's Virginia Woolf, isn't it? The old man raised an eyebrow at Mahito's recognition of the quote. Throughout this literary conversation, Mahito was looking at his book the entire time, not looking up or at the man as he was speaking. It's this simply peaceful interaction. Unfortunately, however, this is JJK, and this character is Mahito that we're talking about, so this story cannot end on a peaceful and quaint note. Obviously, Mahito had left the tunnel in search of some more books and poems to take back to said tunnel. But upon him entering his hideout, he senses 3 souls inside. The old man's, which was weak and flickering away like a candle's flame, fading, and 2 others. The 2 men from earlier, actually, the long-haired, skinnier man and the bald-built one. They entered the tunnel and found the man, and as he shouted at them to leave, the 2 men attacked him, and due to the man's age and frailty, began dying slumped on the ground, his face swelling and bleeding from the blunt force trauma he's taken. Yet his facial expression was that of one at peace. Page 80. Are you dying? Mahito questioned the old man in a whisper. Yes, I believe so, the old man rasped. In this moment, Mahito checked on his soul during his dying moments to see if it had changed. Yet it remained still. Mahito watched on, viewing this man in a similar way to one watching a flower wilt away, a beauty slowly leaving. However, this didn't remain. Page 80 again. I expected to die alone. The old man's soul wavered. A smile formed on his swollen features. But there's someone here to watch an old man give up the ghost. It was like watching a single drop ripple the surface of water, an inconsequential event, yet it was the moment of the old man's death. Here at the end of the very end, the old man's soul metabolized. Thank you. And the old man died with a smile on his lips. Mahito is left speechless, wide-eyed, trying to comprehend what has just happened. He thought that this man was different. He was an exception from other human beings. He thought he had reached some state of enlightenment after losing all of his worldly bonds, but he forged a bond at the moment of his death with Mahito himself. He died with satisfaction and a smile on his face, and Mahito is the reason for it. So Mahito remains silent. He feels cold. He feels as if wind is blowing through him. He doesn't know how to describe this feeling, this emotion, but it's described as feeling like standing in an arid wasteland. As Mahito is coming to grips with what has just happened and trying to rationalize it, the 2 intruders are still complaining to each other how that homeless guy got their clothes dirty, wondering if they'll be able to get the blood out. As if doing something so nonchalant as throwing out the trash, Mahito uses his curse technique on the 2 attackers. Simply killing them, though, would leave a mess, and he doesn't want to clean that up. He transforms these intruders' bodies into a size akin to a chess piece. Mahito looks at the body of the old man. Nothing more than a sack of meat and bones now. He isn't alive, so a soul doesn't reside inside for Mahito to transform with his curse technique. He looks on at the body of the old man, thinking about how much of a problem it's going to be to dispose of. We then cut to Mahito wandering the town again, pondering whether or not to see a movie. Page 82. He chose a small, old-looking theatre and snuck inside. He'd been more motivated recently, as if an unnecessary burden had fallen from his soul, leaving him lighter. We then find out that, as of late, Mahito has been tinkering with more humans. If he can shrink them down and fit them in his pocket, how large can he make them? He's been experimenting with transfigured humans lately, but at the moment, he wasn't going to push himself. He throws away the transfigured humans he made earlier in the movie theatre's lobby. They were starting to change shape again, so he just throws them away. Then he goes into the theatre itself and looks around. It was nearly empty. Probably since it was the middle of the week, but all who were around were seemingly students. Page 83. Mahito stood in a corner and waited for the images to appear on the screen. Then darkness descended, signalling the start of the film. In conclusion, this story is about Mahito meeting someone who challenges the way he thinks. Despite being human, this nameless and eyeless man has acquired such a unique soul that Mahito believes he has reached some level of enlightenment. However, his own preconceptions about the man are proven to be true in the man's literal final moments only through Mahito's own actions. Through making small talk and just simply communicating with the man, Mahito formed a bond with this man that proved his preconceptions and prejudices correct. The story itself also gives us an origin for the small transfigured humans that Mahito uses when fighting. He made them simply as an adaptation so he didn't have to clean up any messy remains. The short story also gives us some added context and planning for Mahito's actions with Junpei, as well as how his plans to test Yuji's mental limits were always part of his plan before Mahito even saw or met Yuji. Maybe due to how significant Sukuna's vessel was to Kenjaku's plan, maybe Mahito heard about Yuji through Jogo's interaction with Gojo, as Gojo brought Yuji to the battlefield, who knows. Maybe Mahito grew fascinated and wanted to break him out of curiosity, but he was planning to break Sukuna's vessel from the start. Also, you can interpret Mahito's actions at the end of the story two ways as well. Was Mahito feeling sadness and loss after the old man's death, or was he merely annoyed and maybe saddened or frustrated at the fact that he was proven right and his interest in the man was wasted? Overall, there's a lot you can say about this story. It doesn't have too much substance and relevance in the actual plot itself, but it is very interesting to see what happens here and with Mahito as a character. Overall, I enjoyed it. Whilst it can be pretty slow as not too much actually happens and it's very dialogue heavy, and especially with the old man's attackers for some reason, the story itself was an intriguing insight into how the disaster curse's mind works. Kiyotake Ichiji, or just Ichiji as we know him, is the beating heart of Jujutsu Society. Despite his lack of combat efficiency, he is still one of, if not the most trusted of Gojo's allies, as well as one of the more knowledgeable sorcerers we see in the series, giving us a lot of our early exposition about Jujutsu Society. However, despite his very important role in the aforementioned Jujutsu Society, we know a surprisingly small amount about him. I mean, turns out he uses Shikigami. Did you know that? I didn't until recently. We know so little about him, yet he is the closest thing to a cog in the system present in the story. I wish we could see more of his relationships with his colleagues in the manga. Well, lucky for me, the light novels give us a little bit more to chew on in regards to Ichiji's personality and his relationships with his fellow sorcerers. In this video, I will be taking a look at the fourth story from the first light novel. The story itself takes place just after Yuji's initial demise to the Finger Bearer Special Grade Curse. After his resurrection, as we see in the main series, Yuji is forced into hiding and spends his time training by watching movies in a small hideout underground that Gojo put him in. In this story, however, Gojo sends Yuji over to Ichiji's place since Gojo is going on a mission and doesn't have time to keep an eye on Yuji. In this story, our boys Ichiji and Yuji take center stage as we see what the veteran sorcerer's life is like, what he does for fun, and other little snippets about him. But genuinely, this little story gives Ichiji's seemingly unassuming character a nice bit of depth that makes me like him a lot more. And I'm not saying this sarcastically, but this light novel made me like Ichiji more than I like Gojo. I was never a Gojo fan to begin with, but big ups Team Ichiji, right? I've covered 3 other stories from the light novels in the past, so feel free to check them out, but without further ado, let's get straight into story number 4, Ichiji at work. The story starts on a hot August day. Here we have Yuji sprawled out on a couch, a similar scene we have once seen before. After the detention center business and Yuji's training arc, we would see him laying down on a couch in a similar way, watching films. However, this time, it's different. Instead of happily watching movies provided to him by Gojo, he's stuck inside a pretty unassuming apartment. Ichiji's apartment. It's Yuji's first day here. You see, Gojo has a mission a good distance away, so Gojo places Yuji with the main man he trusts the most, Ichiji. Granted, Gojo is a bit rude to Ichiji, to put it lightly, but he still has trust in Ichiji's abilities and his character. Gojo leaving Yuji with him highlights this fact. Page 87. I have to go on a business trip. It isn't close, so I may be gone for a few days. It probably isn't great to hide in the same place indefinitely, so stick by Ichiji's side for a while. You may even have some fun. That's what Gojo had said, and that's how Itadori ended up crashing at Ichiji's place for a few days. Before this point, Yuji's life as a sorcerer had been almost exclusively eventful, never a chance for respite, so he never had a chance to be bored. he was training with Megumi and Nobara, or he was exercising cursed spirits. And then after that, he literally died and spent his time after that watching films, living and hiding away from Jujutsu society, and getting punched by this lovely fella, Tsukamoto. That's what the little bear is called. Yet, as soon as Yuji gets a moment of peace to relax away from the possible headaches of curses and being punched in the head by a boxing bear, he's bored. Page 87 again. If it is true that boredom is a poison to the heart, then Itadori had already received a fatal dose. As Yuji is wondering what could relieve his boredom inside of Ichiji's apartment, Yuji remarks that even when the man himself returns to his humble abode, all Ichiji does is stare at his computer screen. It seems that Ichiji isn't as free of things to do as Yuji is. Yuji, curious about what Ichiji was doing, asks if he's reading a blog. However, as Yuji looks over at the veteran sorcerer's screen, his eyes are met with a smorgasbord of information, charts, numbers, taxes, faxes, assets, cash flow. Being able to decipher it would take a real pro. It's clear from a glance that Ichiji was working here, so Yuji makes sure not to make too much noise as to not bother him or interrupt him. So, Yuji quickly asks if he can make use of Ichiji's nearby bookshelf. Page 88. Ichiji, mind if I read a book? He asked. Not at all. Take whatever you want from the bookshelves. Is this one called Leviathan, a fantasy novel? No, it's assigned reading in political philosophy. Ichiji said. You got any manga? My parents have some old ones back home. The situation was desperate. Itadori found a book that looked vaguely like a novel, read a few pages, realised it wasn't for him, and quit. With no other recourse, he flipped on the TV and turned the volume down low. While this sounds like a good idea initially, it was during the middle of the week and around daytime, so there wasn't really anything good on. Just like in real life, all that was on TV around this time was boring daytime talk shows and just boring stuff that Yuji very much wasn't the target audience for, like news programs, celebrity talks, and standard channel surfing fodder. He settles with watching some sort of food show. Yuji comments to himself that it feels kind of weird to be watching TV at this time of day. Ichiji replies that it's probably due to the fact that Yuji would usually be in school at this time of day. This snippet interaction gets Yuji thinking that a little bit of conversation shouldn't interfere with Ichiji's work, so they start to have a real conversation. Yuji asks if this apartment is where he does most of his work. Ichiji replies that he can work from home as long as it doesn't impact his efficiency. Ichiji adds that most companies wouldn't be as relaxed about letting their employees work from home. Yuji then realizes that despite him dealing with adult sorcerers quite regularly since becoming a sorcerer himself, his actual knowledge of standard office work and how companies are organized is significantly lacking, so he didn't really understand what Ichiji meant by this. But as soon as Yuji turns his back towards the television, he notices a familiar face that I promise you we're not expecting. Page 89. Oh hey, Takeda-chan's a guest. Is she famous? Itadori had spoken under his breath, but Ichiji replied anyway. If the man was interested, Itadori thought this might be an effective way to kick off a conversation. Yeah, she's been showing off more skin lately because she just does whatever she wants. She's cute, but she's tall, so you might not notice it. I love that incongruity. Oh, is that what's trendy these days? Asked Itadori. Come to think of it, she had a small role in that drama that used to be on at 9 o'clock on Monday nights. So yeah, it turns out that Ichiji is a little bit of a Takeda-chan fan, which is so funny to think about in my opinion because people have always wondered how certain characters would interact to being asked Todo and Yuki's iconic question. And out of all the people who would probably fail it, Ichiji might actually pass it with flying colours. Ichiji, of all people, passes the Todo taste test. What a lad. Anyway, the story. The two continue their conversation. Yuji goes through a list of TV show genres and tries to figure out what Ichiji actually watches in his spare time. He doesn't watch modern dramas, though he used to watch some older ones. He doesn't watch anything sports themed, as he is an athletic himself. He doesn't watch primetime or late night TV either. So what the hell does Ichiji watch? Well, funnily enough, Ichiji likes to watch Rakugo shows. Now, for the uninformed, like myself before writing this script, who don't know what Rakugo shows are, well, as it turns out, Ichiji probably would have gotten along well with Takaba and Kenjaku to some extent, since out of all the shows he actually watches, he watches daytime Rakugo, which is basically like classical, old school Japanese stand-up comedy, except that they're actually sat down instead of, you know, stood up. So Ichiji likes comedy as well. So Takaba could be friends with Ichiji. That's kind of dope. However, Yuji, despite spending a lot of his spare time watching TV, doesn't really watch Rakugo as it's pretty uncool and it's usually on during Sunday evenings when most students are out having fun. So Yuji is kind of shut down conversationally. Him and Ichiji seemingly have nothing in common at all. But as Yuji is starting to feel a bit awkward, he notices that Ichiji has stopped typing because of the two's conversation. So Yuji turns around to continue to watch Takeda-chan on the TV. Right now, the stuff he's watching is neither boring nor interesting, and in combination with him sitting on a sofa and the warm weather, he starts to nod off and fall asleep. Page 91, Itadori. I have to go out on some business. Itadori started upright. Oh, Metal Tomori. Metal Tomori? Ichiji gave a puzzled look. Oops, sorry, I guess I was nodding off. I was having the weirdest dream. What kind of dream was it? It's kind of fuzzy now, Itadori responded. Anyway, are we going out? If you're sleepy, there's no need to force yourself. Feel free to stay here and sleep. No, I want to go out. I need to photosynthesize. So it's decided that Yuji is going to tag along with Ichiji. However, since Yuji had recently died, his identity still needs to be concealed from the higher-ups. So Ichiji gives him a set of his personal sunglasses to help conceal his identity. Yuji gets hyped with the idea of walking around with Ichiji wearing sunglasses, and Yuji reminisces that it reminds him of Men in Black, of all things. Ichiji then says that he tends to do a lot of investigative work, and he wears sunglasses sometimes as cursors are extremely perceptive to the eye and can tell when people are looking at them, so he has to hide his eyes and where he's looking a lot. Yuji then asks if Gojo wears a blindfold for the same reason, to which Ichiji replies that Gojo wears a blindfold for a much different reason than Ichiji wearing sunglasses. I mean, why would Gojo care if a guest knows that he's looking at it? Page 91 again. Itadori put on the sunglasses, then he looked back and forth between the mirror and Ichiji. He put his hands on his chin and struck a pose. How do I look, Ichiji? Like a secret agent? Ichiji thought Itadori looked like a young hooligan, but Ichiji was an adult, so he kept this to himself. And if you couldn't tell, this interaction is where we get this nice piece of art from Gege in this story. As I've said before, each story in the light novels, at least in the first book, has an accompanying art piece to help the reader visualize the story, and this is the one we get for this Ichiji story. Pretty nice. We then read of the two simply driving along the highway. Yuji, being the country bumpkin he is fascinated by the scenery sweeping past his vision as the two were driving around in Tokyo. And since Yuji hasn't really had time to explore Tokyo, he's fascinated by everything in his field of view. Ichiji says that the two are taking the highway route because the streets tend to be crowded around this time of day. And since the car the two are in is owned by Jujutsu Tech, Ichiji is very careful about not damaging it. From Ichiji telling him this, Itadori gets the sense that being an adult with a car wasn't as simple and as easy as he once envisioned. As Ichiji takes an exit off the highway and enters the more populated streets with heavy traffic, Ichiji's worries of damaging the car spreads to Yuji as he grows with worry as cars drive past or get close to the car they're in. Eventually, however, the two reach their destination, the nearby ward office, which is basically like a local government building, right? Ichiji reveals that they've come here to simply deliver some documents, pulling a set of papers out of his work bag as he speaks. Curious, Yuji peeks inside the work bag and sees stacks of documents inside. Ichiji then explains what they're actually doing here. Page 94. Applications for permission to use sites in need of cursed spirit countermeasures, requests for closure of public facilities, applications for permission to perform road work, rosters of on-site personnel with accompanying proof of insurance, and so on. Yuji is confused by this. Why not just put up a curtain? Ichiji explains that yes, that keeps people away, but if it's something that takes a long period of time, people would grow curious and confused as to why they can't use certain roads or facilities. Yuji retorts that he thought Jujutsu Tech worked with the government for aid with cursed spirits and keeping the peace with non-sorcerers. So Ichiji explains. Page 95. Yes, but to all appearances, Jujutsu High is a private school, so it requires the documentation of a private school. And if that isn't enough, further documentation is necessary to prove to regular society that nothing unusual is going on. Thus, putting up a sign reading Falling Rock Removal requires paperwork. Oh, it's more of a hassle than I thought. Of course, Ichiji said, and I also have to provide explanations in person. Ichiji then heads into the office the two arrived at whilst Yuji waits outside. Whilst waiting, however, Yuji sees what it means to be a sorcerer in a different light, so to speak. Page 96. It's more difficult than I thought to preserve our regular daily life. Next, the two head to another office building. The business inside supplies and installs vending machines. Yuji questions if all of a sudden curses have been haunting vending machines or something like that. Ichiji replies, no, it's just the people here supply and install all the vending machines at Jujutsu High. Ichiji teaches Yuji that the outside world also views Jujutsu High as a somewhat religious institution, so they need to have as few non-sorcerers knowing what's going on inside of Jujutsu Tech as possible. And on top of that, at the end of the day, this is a business relationship, so to speak. Personal visits to companies you're friendly with are very important. Ichiji then asks Yuji what his favourite drink is, and jokingly Ichiji says that he'll mention it to the people inside, and his favourite drink might be stocked up in the vending machines next time he's at Jujutsu High. Page 97. Itadori bowed as he watched Ichiji walk into the office building. When Ichiji returned a few minutes later, a good-natured man in work clothes was with him. Apparently he wanted to see Ichiji off. Itadori watched the man offer a polite bow, which Ichiji returned. For a moment, Itadori thought maybe he should join in. Then he remembered he was officially dead at the moment. The two drive away, but they are very quickly interrupted by Ichiji's phone ringing. Ichiji stops the car and picks up the phone. It's Gojo! He needs Ichiji to give him details on a nearby window. You may not remember this, but very early in the series, Ichiji explains what a window is, but he explains it here as well, so I'll just use this quote. Page 98. A window is someone who isn't a sorcerer, but who is affiliated with Jujutsu High, and who can see curses. Windows can trace curses and assist investigations. Oh, okay, said Itadori. I heard about that when we went to the detention center. Ichiji's shoulders tensed, and his fingers, which had been flipping through memo pages, froze. Yuji then asked Ichiji why he has both a memo pad and a smartphone, to which Ichiji says that he pretty much has to know about every single window in all of Japan. Yuji is baffled by this. It's way too much to have to remember or write down. Ichiji retorts that it's basically because despite Gojo's level of intelligence and good memory, he refuses to make an effort to remember anything and forces Ichiji to remember it all. He even asks Ichiji about train timetables and convenience store sweets, all because he refuses to put the effort into remembering anything. As Ichiji was complaining to Yuji about the strongest sorcerer's annoying personality, he finds the info he needs and calls Gojo back. Page 99. Hello? Gojo? In that area? Hey, I did it as fast as I could. Yes, I did once call you back in under a minute, but what do I care if your ice cream melted while you were waiting? Why would you slap me when you get back? Make a memo for it? How can you say that to me? No, I refuse to schedule myself for a completely unjustified lecture. So just forget it. Whoa. Within the confines of the car, Itadori could clearly overhear Gojo chewing out Ichiji. The ridiculousness of it even got on Itadori's nerves. Oh, don't worry though. Gojo has even more mundane and annoying stuff to complain to Ichiji about. Page 99 again. Huh? Yes. Now that you mentioned it, you used the principal's cursed corpse for training. What about it? Huh? You took it without permission, and you want me to put it back. Where is... It's lying out in the open in the basement, huh? Well, Fest... Yes? Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Understood. I'll be sure to fetch it. You added more movies to the film collection. No, you can't claim that as a business expense. No, absolutely not. Out of the question. Yes? Yes, I'll do my best. Today, Ichiji was running errands both large and small. Itadori stared at him intently. That guy sure has it rough. Before they knew it, the sun was starting to fall. The two had been running errands for the majority of the day. Ichiji states that the day took a little bit longer than expected. Yuji adds that it's Gojo's fault they were out so long anyway. However, despite the two's complaints, Ichiji does give Gojo credit where it's due. Page 100. He is dependable, but he's not much of an adult. You're not wrong about his dependability. He's strong and kind, but he has a way of, pushing people past their limit. Yeah, I totally get that. Yet, he has a soft spot for you students. Ichiji noted. Definitely. Itadori agrees. He's always done right by me. Agreed. I hate to admit it, but he's talented and charismatic. Many of the sorcerers look up to him, although I do hate to admit it. It's clear that the atmosphere between the two, after spending the whole day together, and with Yuji getting a glimpse into Ichiji's busy and important yet relatively uneventful work life, the atmosphere between the two had lightened up, and became much more comfortable. Page 100 again. You sure have a busy schedule, Ichiji. Ichiji responded with a half smile. Did I look that busy to you? Well, you calculate stuff and handle documents and visit people and serve as Gojo Sensei's errand boy, and that bit about errand boy was unnecessary. Sorry, Itadori said. But despite being so busy, you don't do much sorcerer-type work. It's pretty unexciting, isn't it? Honestly, yes. I admire your bluntness, Ichiji said. Anyway, fighting is outside my expertise. And Gojo-sensei makes up for it by pushing all sorts of work onto you? Yes, I guess he does. Ichiji then expressed that most sorcerers believe that they live outside of modern society, detached from it. But they aren't. Normal human society and sorcerers are tied together, and that means Ichiji has to perform all these countless mundane and dull tasks. Page 101. Thank you, Ichiji, he said. What made you say that all of a sudden? Your work is really unexciting. Yes, what about it? Did that need repeating? Ichiji said. It's just, I realized that thanks to your unexciting, painstaking work, sorcerers retain ties to the rest of the world. I'm thankful for that. You are, huh? Ichiji's voice was faint. Despite how wholesome this interaction may seem on the surface, it's not how it appears. Yuji's gratitude leaves Ichiji with a grim expression, saddened even. Ichiji says that Yuji shouldn't be given thanks. Ichiji himself should be apologizing. Page 102. Huh? What for? He had never imagined an apology was necessary and couldn't guess the reason. The childlike, ingenuous expression on his face showed his utter confusion. Ichiji frowned. His next words came haltingly. The other day, I sent you into a deadly situation. Oh, that! Itadori recalled the series of fights against the special grade cursed spirit. That had indeed been a bitter experience, but he didn't hold it against Ichiji. Ichiji's voice only became more grave. I said it was merely an evacuation. I also warned you not to engage. I didn't mean to fail in my obligations as assistant manager, but at the very least, that was no place to send Festiers, and you were the resultant sacrifice. Yeah, but I'm right here, alive and well, aren't I? After having dying once, Yuji wants to make light of the situation and try and help Ichiji feel better, but after hearing Ichiji's voice tremble, he thinks to himself he has had those close to him die, sure. Yuji himself has died even, yet he hasn't felt that he was the reason for someone else's death, which is why Ichiji is clearly feeling so guilty. Yuji then feels this instant wave of regret go through him. Page 102 again. I told you it wouldn't be so bad. I'm a sorcerer who can't fight, an adult whose job is sending students, all younger than me, on dangerous missions. You've come back from the dead, but I will send you back into battle. The sound of the engine drowned out the sound of Ichiji swallowing. As an adult, I want to lend seamless support to your missions, and I'll try to do better. Ichiji. After seeing how tirelessly Ichiji works throughout the day, Yuji had seen how dedicated Ichiji is. What Ichiji had been doing today was his form of atonement in his own eyes, doing as best a job as he possibly could. Page 103. I vow to do my job, Ichiji said. Ichiji's voice was deeply apologetic and low, as if a weight were crushing it. It didn't have Gojo's dependability or the principal's severity. Instead, it expressed intense worry and sincerity. Ichiji couldn't fight, but he would never allow himself to say, I won't let you die again. Despite how he felt, he had to send Itadori on more missions. Itadori had no idea how disheartening that must have been to a conscientious adult. He did understand, however, that Ichiji's words expressed his innermost feelings and carried the meaning of what he wanted to most convey. So he received them, accepted them, and smiled. Like I said, thanks, Ichiji. Itadori spoke softly as he looked at his reflection in the window. I'll probably keep being reckless and make you worry, but that's my choice. I'm not going to stop. That's just how you are, right? Yeah, but I'm going to get stronger. So you don't have to worry about me forever, Ichiji. And you'll help me, won't you? With the things I don't understand or know, and stuff that takes more than fighting to solve. Yes, I will, Ichiji said. This wholesome moment leaves Ichiji trembling, almost crying, but his eyes remain focused on the road. But as the drive continues, Yuji asks if Ichiji is heading home. He says he is, but the two haven't eaten anything yet. They should go out somewhere nice to eat. Ichiji lets Yuji decide. Page 104. Steak or yakiniku? Which will it be? Oh, that's the ultimate dilemma. Wait 20 minutes while I think about it. That's too long. Their laughter filled the vehicle. The car's taillights streamed through the night as if shaking off teardrops. The end. Overall, this story, despite starting out relatively dull, in my opinion, gave me a lot more love for Ichiji than I expected. Ichiji is a strange outlier in the world of JJK, despite being a veteran sorcerer. He cannot fight. Despite that, however, he is the one driving children to dangerous missions that sometimes result in their death. He isn't a powerful sorcerer like Gojo or Nanami, yet he retains the guilt of being the person that sometimes drives these young sorcerers to meet their demise, whilst at the same time being the linchpin that prevents the normal human world and the world of sorcery from falling apart, drowning in chaos and collapsing in on themselves. He feels guilt for being the person who sent the Festiers to the detention centre. Yes, he told them to escape and to not engage, that it was only an evacuation, but that doesn't mean anything. He still feels the guilt of being the ones who sent them there. This story added a lot more depth to Ichiji in my opinion. It brought light to the fact that Ichiji could probably become good friends with not only Takaba, due to them both enjoying watching comedy, but also Todo, due to the two's shared knowledge and fondness of Takada-chan. And to be honest, I've never been the biggest fan of Yuji, but the emotional maturity and understanding he showed Ichiji in the story made me like him a little bit more. As I said though, it started off mundane, with Yuji and Ichiji stuck outside doing simple odd jobs to keep Jujutsu Tech and its actions hidden through paperwork and standard boring activities that wouldn't be out of place for any average office worker. But it ended with us, or at least me, viewing Ichiji in a much more positive and fond light. Most characters in Jujutsu Kaisen can be summed up in a single word. Choso is a brother. Maki is a sister. Gojo is the unadulterated, pure personification of strength. Toji is rebellion, given form. Nanami is maturity, in the shape of a blonde salaryman. However, for the longest time, I always wondered what word would best describe Yuji Itadori. Protagonist, boring, simple. I've never been the biggest fan of Yuji, but going through these light novels has really changed my perception of him as a character, and after reading these stories in this book, watching the anime, reading the manga, playing the games, the word that I would use to describe Yuji is simply kindness. The final story of the first light novel is what we will be discussing today, and as you can tell, despite it being pretty short and sweet, it really changed my opinion on Yuji. Like most of the other stories in this book, it takes place during the gap in time in which Yuji is believed to not be alive and is being hidden from the higher-ups. The story specifically takes place somewhat in the background, starting just before Yuji's resurrection is revealed and ending just before the Goodwill event starts. At night, Yuji goes for walks in residential areas since he wants some free time to himself, but he can't just go out during the day since he is still currently KIA to the Jujutsu Tech heads. But whilst going on one of these walks, Yuji comes across a lone boy on a swing who seems to be haunted by a strange curse. But that's enough of the synopsis. Let's just get into story number 5, the final story of the first light novel, Illusory Trek to the Guardian Demon. The story here starts on a late night. We follow Yuji walking alone through a nearby bedroom village, a residential area away from the noise of the main city. You see, Gojo told Yuji that he was going to reveal to the world that Yuji had been resurrected very soon, so Gojo wasn't too worried about Yuji going out on his own for walks in the nearby area. This area itself was relatively quiet during the day, so at night it was almost completely empty, and on this specific occasion, Yuji was going for a walk around 9 PM. The moon was high, and there wasn't a person in sight. Page 107. Itadori had died once, but after his long period in hiding, simply taking a walk for no specific purpose felt luxurious. Yuji spent a good amount of time simply walking around the area, thinking to himself, enjoying the peace and quiet that these streets provide. But he's already been walking for a while now, so he decides to head back. He tries taking a different path back to where he came from. However, in doing so, he comes across a simple park. Yuji is madly surprised that there is a park here and continues to walk home until he hears a creaking coming from the park. A swing, actually. He sees a small figure using the park's swing on his own. And remember, Yuji came out here late at night, specifically to avoid people and getting recognized as Sukuna's vessel. So what is someone doing late at night on the swings all by their lonesome? Page 108. A small form sat there swinging back and forth in the glow of an old streetlight. He looks too mature for an elementary school student, maybe he's in junior high. As the boy swung, his naturally wavy hair, trimmed short, flipped back and forth. Of course, our main man Yuji, good-natured as he is, meets the boy with a smile and asks him what's up. Why is he here on his own in the park whilst it's still dark outside? Now, the thing here that I find funny is that the kid is initially weary of Yuji, as he looks like a common ruffian or hoodlum. Page 108 again. Itadori wore a uniform over his hoodie and had bleached blonde hair. The boy may have thought he had attracted the attention of a delinquent. However, when Itadori reached the streetlight, it revealed his face and his innate friendliness, and the boy's facial expression softened. Yuji then sits on the swing next to the boy. Page 109. I'm Kairi Minato. Cool name. My grandma who died last year said that people romanticize the ocean, so I'm named after it, the boy explained. The boy then recounts how his grandma said that she once clashed with a bear and won, to which Yuji smiles and replies that she must have had a strong personality. But the thought of losing a grandparent has his mind drifting for a moment to his own grandfather. Although his mind drifts slightly, he doesn't forget why he came over to the boy in the first place. Page 109 again. Well, your grandmother may have been cool, but your mom and dad may be stricter. It's pretty late. Aren't they worried about you? The kid freezes up. Yuji quietly remains on the swing, pushing his feet off the ground, gently swaying and allowing the young boy to get his thoughts together to reply. All the while, the nearby streetlights flicker and wane as the night grows darker. Eventually, though, the young Kairi manages to reply, saying that he can't go back home. Yuji then questions, why can't he go home? Is it too far? Is he afraid of the dark? Well, why can't he go home? Page 110. Will you promise not to laugh if I tell you? I won't laugh. After all, you aren't laughing about it. The seriousness of the boy let Yuji know that this isn't a laughing matter. To the scared child in front of him, this is very serious. So, Yuji patiently and intently waits for the kid to explain. Page 110 again. There's a demon there. A demon? It appears in the front of the house at night. It's only about this big though. Kairi cupped the air as though he were holding a beach ball. The way Kairi describes the scale of the demon with such a specific vision that it seems very clear that the child is visualizing something he's previously seen. It's not just his imagination running wild. Page 110 again. Kairi frowned apologetically. Totally unbelievable, right? No, I believe you. Huh? If you say there's a demon there, it's there, Itadori asserted. I can tell by looking at you, it's really bothering you. Sort of, anyway. You believe me? Yuji at this part in the story is relatively inexperienced, but he has still had a fair few run-ins with cursed spirits, so if this demon is a cursed spirit, which he believes it is, he thinks to himself that it's probably only a grade 3, given how Kairi described it as only being the size of a beach ball. Yuji then reaffirms the child by saying that he's seen a lot of similar things to the demon that Kairi is describing. He hops off the swing and asks Kairi if they should go check it out. Kairi is, of course, hesitant to the idea. Yuji then comforts him by saying that he'll be with him the entire time, and if things look really bad, they can just turn around and go back to the park. So the two start their little journey towards this supposed demon. But Yuji has a single thought in his head during this walk towards the child's demon. He's not thinking about looking cool in front of him, he's not thinking about a possible easy victory against a grade 3 spirit, he's not even thinking about fulfilling his role as a Jujutsu sorcerer. He's thinking something very simple. Page 111. It just sucks when you can't go home, he said. And as a result, the two have a brief 10-minute walk. Just to keep the two in high spirits, they talk about their favourite movies and manga. They pass the time with peaceful chit-chat until it's suddenly interrupted by their arrival at Kairi's humble abode. Page 111 again. One streetlight shone directly in front of the gate to a house. It was a simple house, deep blue with a triangular roof. As soon as it came into view, Kairi stopped walking. There it is. He spoke with a struggle through a dry throat. Instinctive tension froze his legs in place. Yuji steps in front of the boy, then turns his eyes to the doorway so he can place his eyes upon this demon. Page 111 yet again. A dark form sluggishly stepped from the shadow of the gateposts. Smaller than a human being, it lacked the charm of a small animal. It seemed unnatural, with a twisted external appearance that caused revulsion to well up from within Itadori's soul. Without a doubt, it was a curse. It cried out. It had two mouths where its eyes should be. Its nose looked to have been shaved off. It didn't have any ears, and its main mouth was sutured shut with stitches. Its body was composed of exposed muscle tissue, short legs and a small trunk, and long thick arms that ended in massive fists. Two distorted projections that looked like bundles of blood vessels extended from its temples like horns. No wonder Kairi thought it was a demon. This spirit, this demon, starts gnashing its teeth at the young Kairi. All three sets are gritted at the sight of this young child, so he cowers in fear. But Itadori steps in front to shield him. It seems that Yuji's initial assertion of the curse's grade was spot on. It looks to be nothing more than a simple grade 3 spirit, so dealing with it should be a pretty simple ordeal. And thus the curse leaps at him, but Yuji quickly evades, clenches his fists and gets down to business. Page 112. Seeing that simple attack as an opportunity, Itadori twisted and swung. He dodged the demon's fists, closed the distance, and drove his fist into its torso. Divergent fist. Kairi, though still nervous, thanks Yuji for his help, giving a brief bow to him before he walks inside his now demon-free home. Yuji is thankful that his long nighttime walk has come to an end, so he walks home and assumes that this was the last time he would need to help the young boy. However, a few days pass. Yuji naturally walks along the same path he did when he helped Kairi, passing through the same park in the process. But he sees a familiar sight. It's Kairi on that same swing set on his own, again in the middle of the night, wearing a similarly glum expression on his face. Yuji sees this child and approaches him again. He then in turn asks him what's wrong. He exorcised this spirit, the demon was dead. To which Kairi looks up at Yuji with a grim sadness across his face. So in response and disbelief, Yuji sprints towards the child's house. His heart is pounding as he reaches Kairi's home, not from overexerting himself, but from the alarm bells going off in his head. There it was, but it couldn't be. He exorcised it. There was no way a cursed spirit with that exact same form appeared in the exact same place as the one from a couple days ago. But Yuji thought maybe it was a strange coincidence until the spirit spoke. Without hesitation, Yuji repeats the process in an almost systematic way. The demon leaps, Yuji evades, and counters with a divergent fist. It was disturbing how easy the curse is dispatched. Page 115. Don't feel too bad about it, Itadori. Itadori spun around at the sound of the voice. He didn't need a mirror to know how confused he must have looked. Kairi? I doubt there's anything you can do. Itadori is understandably confused. The spirit may have come back, but he got rid of it again. What does he mean there isn't anything he can do? Page 15 again. Kairi looked up at the roof of the house. Itadori followed his line of sight and stared at the roof, and his eyes widened. I think the demon is guarding the house. It'll show up here over and over to drive away bad people. Yuji's eyes widen as he sees the figure he exorcised 2 times over, appearing yet again perched on the house's roof. But all of a sudden we then cut to a conversation between Yuji and Gojo. Yuji explaining the events of what had just transpired. Then Yuji proceeds to plead to his teacher for help. This is something that Gojo, with his years of experience and overwhelming strength, could solve in seconds. However, Gojo, in his sunglasses, wearing sweat clothes, reading a magazine, and eating daifuku, he refuses to help. Page 116. Then what? Gojo asked. There's no then what, Itadori said. Obviously, a demon that resurrects is beyond my ability. Shouldn't you come with me? Well, I'm busy. You don't look busy. Gojo was rolling around on the sofa, holding a magazine in both hands, kicking his legs, and somehow also eating daifuku. Then I'll ask Nanamine. Itadori sighed. Don't treat grade 1 sorcerers like your support center. Huh? Whilst this may seem cruel and unusual from our always jubilant Gojo, this attitude and seriousness is something akin to his conversation with Megumi, page 116 again. That demon's a cinch to waste, right? It doesn't sound like this particular cursed spirit has a cursed energy over grade 3. There's no need for me to get involved, said Gojo. But it comes back no matter how many times I exercise it. There haven't been any casualties yet, but if we let it go, something bad might happen, and then it'll be too late. So exercise it until it doesn't come back anymore. If I could do that, there'd be no problem. Yuji. Gojo raised his face from the magazine and looked at Itadori from behind his sunglasses. He wasn't wearing his usual flippant smile. What do you think is the main reason people can't help other people? Yuji freezes at this question. He thinks of all the transfigured humans Mahito killed, the son at the detention center, people he couldn't save, times where he couldn't do anything. And so Gojo imparts some advice on his student. Page 117. Because they're weak? Gojo let out a faint sigh and stood up from the sofa. That's partially true, but strength and weakness aren't everything. Gojo only knew about the movie theatre and the incident at Satozakura High School from reports he heard. However, given the tragic events that had occurred and the harsh reality Itadori confronted, Gojo could imagine that the boy was bearing a painful burden. Yuji's head begins to hang low, trying to figure out what the hell Gojo means. Page 117 again. In this world, tragedies too often end in misery, even when it's possible to help. But the problem isn't a lack of strength or getting there too late. As Gojo passed Itadori, he patted him on the head without making eye contact. The main reason it happens is that people forget they have the strength to help. At those words, Itadori gasped and looked up. Gojo's words strengthen Itadori's resolve and leads him to take another look at the situation. Page 118. While we're at it, let's review one more thing. What is the number one thing that gives rise to curses? Negative emotions? If that's true, Gojo responded, then you already know the answer. Namely, that fighting and exercising aren't everything. And with that, Yuji rushes out with a stronger determination to get to the bottom of this demonic case, saying a quick goodbye to his teacher and rushing out the door within the same breath. As Yuji leaves, Gojo thinks to himself, page 118 again, it's easy to lend a hand to a child who has fallen, but it's a teacher's job to show a child how to stand up unassisted. It isn't always easy. Itadori's sincerity was a more significant attribute than his being Sukuna's vessel, and as a result, trauma had the potential to become a curse more fearsome than anything else. A nasty curse, preventable only by confronting one's heart. Instead of cradling that heart, Gojo could teach it to be prepared. That's what it means to raise students. It's much harder than teaching Jujutsu. Smiling despite his serious thoughts, Gojo downed the rest of his daifuku. Now, with this newfound zeal, Yuji dashes towards Kairi's home. However, there is one minor issue. It's daytime, so when he arrives at Kairi's house, he is met by a very different figure to the one he repeatedly punched out of existence. It's seemingly the young boy's mother, or at least she appears to be. But as Yuji converses with her, he can see the look on her face and how she talks about Kairi. She truly cares for his well-being and wants to figure out why he won't come home at night. So Yuji explains that he is a friend of Kairi's, and as it turns out, this woman is Kairi's adoptive mother. You see, Kairi's grandmother recently passed away, and as a result, he's getting looked after by a couple who were friends of Kairi and his grandmother. Kairi's biological mother died in an accident, so the woman Yuji is speaking to is the boy's adoptive mother. She describes how she feels insecure about being Kairi's replacement mother, and then she proceeds to explain the origin of the demon that her adopted son has been seeing, even though she herself can't even see it. Page 121. The demon is kind of a fairy tale, his grandmother told him, or rather, a kind of warning fable. She said a demon would show up where bad children are. I suppose it's like a Namehage demon. Oh, the cool grandmother, Itadori said. Then all of a sudden we cut to hours later, with the sun setting. Yuji walks through the flickering streetlights, the sky growing darker and darker as the sorcerer approaches the all too familiar playground. Page 122. Sure enough, Kairi Minato was there. At the same time, in the same park, his gentle swinging causing the old metal to creak. Itadori, good evening. Yeah, hey. For a short while they simply swing, going back and forth, until Yuji asks if the demon is still at Kairi's house. He says it probably is. It always is. Yuji responds that he knows his grandmother is the one who told him about the demon. Page 122 again. Who told you that? Your mother. The resulting expression on Kairi's face was difficult to describe. He looked bitter, and also as if someone had prodded a wound. It was clearly an unpleasant topic for him, but Itadori continued talking. Sorry if you don't like to call her mother. Kairi replies that he just isn't used to his new family name. Yuji asks why he thinks that demon keeps appearing in front of his house. Kairi says it's because he's a bad kid. He didn't have any family left when his grandmother died, so his adopted parents took him in as they were friends of his grandmother. He thinks he's just a bother to them. They feed him and they send him to school. He feels he's a burden to them. So Yuji enlightens the boy on this cursed situation. Page 123. At last he sighed deeply and spoke. You put that curse there. Itadori looked directly at Kairi for the first time. And since you put it there, only you can get rid of it. Yuji warns Kairi that if they don't get rid of the demon, his adopted parents are in danger. They might get attacked if they don't do anything. Page 124. Your fear gave birth to that curse, Itadori explained. If you want me to shut up, fine. But if you want to go home, you gotta work with me before there's no place for you to go home to. Without skipping a beat, the two muster their courage and run towards the house. Worries flooding the minds of these two, and those worries are given form when they see the demon's new form. Page 125. Seriously? It's getting bigger? Itadori exclaimed. They could clearly see it even from a distance. Try again. The body of the demon, the size of a beach ball, had now bulked up to the dimensions of a station wagon. Its hulking arms spread to block the street, and the two mouths in its eyeless face were baring and grinding their teeth menacingly. The boy's fear made the curse stronger, making it huge in comparison to its earlier state. That, in turn, makes Kairi fearful. He wants to turn away and run, but Yuji reminds him that he'll lose his home if he runs away. But Kairi right now is a deer in headlights. He is frozen. His instincts are screaming at him to run. But then he sees his adopted mother stepping outside the home, just behind the demon. Maybe her talk with Itadori inspired her to try and help her new son. But despite her inability to see curses, the demon turns its attention to her. Kairi takes off, running. But not to flee. He wasn't running away. He was running straight towards the demon, calling the woman in front of him Mom. Page 126. A shadow passed by Kairi as fast as the wind. Itadori was swinging his right fist packed with cursed energy. The demon didn't have time to dodge. Itadori was tearing across the asphalt at top speed and at close range. He leapt under the beautiful moon. With incredible momentum, his fist bashed into the demon's face. The demon's arms, now around as big as logs, swung in an arc, but were too late to stop Itadori's attack. Try. Cursed energy coursed through the demon's body. Despite its size, it dispersed quickly. Just like a popped balloon, it deflated and whooshed away. As if to make up for all the lost time Kairi spent on the swings, alone and in fear, he cries in his new mother's arms, simply exclaiming Mom, Mom, over and over again. The two tear-covered family members hold each other for a short while, until Kairi looks off to Yuji, says thank you very much, bows, and enters the house he was so afraid of alongside his mother. When the two were deeper inside the house, Yuji turned his view to the side of the road. He sees something the size of a beach ball rolling around. The demon was on the verge of death, the stitches across its mouth slowly coming undone. Page 127. Kairi is truly home now. When Itadori spoke, the demon's shoulders shuddered. Then with its face that was all mouths, the demon smiled broadly and vanished. With the curse exercised, Yuji gives one final thesis behind the strange curse's abilities. Page 127 again. I think it was his grandmother, Itadori decided. He didn't have any proof, but if it were true, Itadori thought she must have been a cool grandmother. He thought her love and worry for Kairi must have outweighed all else. I need to make sure I don't make Grandpa worry either. Yuji thinks of his grandfather's final wishes. He had decided to live by the words his grandfather spoke. But he would not just do so for his grandfather. He will continue to fight, but also for Megumi, for Nobara, for people who need help. Page 128. As his resolve firmed, Itadori's feet turned toward home. Sometimes a detour leads you back to your rightful place. Itadori's long, long walk had finally ended. Overall, this story is a brief mission about our main man, Yuji, helping a grieving child get acclimated with his new adoptive family. The child's grief and his deceased grandmother's emotions that have been left behind become personified in the form of a demonic curse that haunts the boy. It made me have a little bit more appreciation for JJK's main character, and it made me even more excited to check out the light novel's second book. But with that being said, let me know if you enjoyed. Toodles my doodles, thank you for watching, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one. Peace. So that was a long one, but that was pretty much all there is to say about the first Jujutsu Kaisen light novel. As I said during the intro, if this compilation does well, I'll go through the rest of the stories from the JJK light novels. I'll go through the other 5 from the second JJK light novel, Thorny Road at Dawn. This book itself having stories with Mekamaru, Nobara, Toge, and a bunch more that gives us a surprising amount of world building and a little bit more about characters who were only mentioned in passing in the main series, like Sugawara no Michizane. But with that being said, thank you all for watching. Toodles my doodles, hopefully I see you in the next one. Peace.